You're listening to the On Call Empath Show.
Hey guys, we are back for another episode of the On Call Empath, and I got a treat for you guys on this elite series today. My next guest is Dr. Nicole Thankston. She's a high functioning anxiety expert. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Generational patterns, hormonal issues, especially with people with anxiety. You guys definitely don't want to miss this episode. Nicole, it's an honor to have you on this podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm really thankful to be here and can't wait to kind of dive into all the things.
Yes. And I can be the first one to tell you that I always struggled with performance anxiety and I mean, I can function, but like I always get anxiety like before I do something big or if I had take too much on my plate. So there's a lot of empaths that are tuning in today. So let's dive right in. How did you get started in the work that you do? And I know that you have a wellness center in Atlanta that's doing really good. And you're a co-founder of that, and you're board certified licensed professional counselor and online educator and speaker. So how did you kind of transition into that, especially after everything that you've personally been through?
Yeah, it's such a good question, but it's also like one of the most challenging questions for me because it's like, tell me about yourself. And I'm like, oh gosh, like
How do we do
what?
that? Yeah.
But spot on. So I'm a licensed professional counselor in Georgia, and my husband and I co-founded Atlanta Wellness Collective, which is a holistic counseling and wellness practice outside of Atlanta. And I would say, like, if I took it way, way back, I know we're going to talk about generational patterns, and
Yeah.
to me, story and narrative are so important. And so the work that I do, I can't say it's not interconnected with me and like who I am and my story. And so, I grew up in a family that, I'll make this quick, but mental health was very valued. It wasn't very stigmatized. And I am so incredibly grateful for that because, as you know, mental health can be so stigmatized in our society and in many, many, many cultures. And I had a great great grandfather who was in like a psychology-esque kind of program at some point. I mean, obviously didn't know him, but I have a very, very long-standing family history of mental illness and addiction and divorce. And really, really thankful that my grandparents, not necessarily all of them, but my grandparents, my parents, they all have sought counseling and therapy at different times in their lives. And it was really, really normalized. And so when I was in high school and college, I wanted to go into the medical field. Most people in my family are doctors and, in finance and same
here.
So this is going to be a little mini therapy session for us, like high achievers, I think. But
totally.
There was always just so much expectation. And I grew up in a very competitive, very academically successful family, and achievement was very valued, and grew up in a very competitive school and in Atlanta. And I always wanted to be a doctor, but my world was kind of rocked when I went to undergrad at the University of Georgia and started working in a counseling department for my church that I grew up in, and just sitting with the individuals that I was so privileged to get to sit with. And they would allow me to be in on kind of like counseling sessions and intakes. And I coordinated funerals there. I met with grieving families and in the hospital with the pastors. And it just really changed my whole perspective. And I kind of switched my trajectory to go into counseling and therapy. And I would say kind of more practically, that's how I ended up where I am now. But I would say that mental health has always been something that's very interesting to me, along with personal growth. And I kind of got into my niche with working with high achievers, or as I've coined the term, it's not my term, but anxious achievers. I kind of got into that just because I was doing so much of my own exploration and my own work in just kind of tearing down these not only kind of generational messages and patterns, but core beliefs, and my own identity was really wrapped up in just achievement and was
Mhm.
highly, highly anxious. Went through some pretty traumatic things in my early 20s, which I'm, sure we'll probably get into a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and just started doing so much research and work in this area that now I counsel um, other high achieving individuals who experience
Yeah.
anxiety. I like to call them overachievers or overfunctioners,
Yeah.
um, and it's really rewarding work.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally resonate with everything you're saying because I started off after college. I went through the same background. I wanted to do so many great things, and I worked into, a corporate setting, and it just wasn't for me. I tried. I kept going, and I just said, I have to make this work somehow because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what I was
Yeah.
trained to do as a child. But it all starts from childhood. So I wanted to focus on that.
Yeah.
You actually were born a high achiever. And you wrote something saying, let no one outwork you today, and you would be writing that in your bedroom at 8 years old. What
Yeah.
did you mean by that, and how did you start off at that young of an age to already be like, I'm gonna be like the best and best, and if I don't, that pressure, that could really um co- you know take with us to adulthood, and it could really rock our world later on.
For sure. So I think for anybody listening, one of my key points when I'm working in therapy with clients is we aren't born into a vacuum. Like we're not born and, oh, here I am and blank slate, right? We're born into family systems with generations of values and generations of potentially false core beliefs and anxieties and hurts and traumas. And um, all of those things impact us. And so when you look at my family, everybody is very high achieving. I would say that was a huge, huge family value growing up, along with excellence and personal growth. And, all of these things are wonderful. I have a
Mhm.
wonderful family. I love my family and I'm very, very close with them. But yeah, I think what happens is we get these kind of core beliefs from a young age and these messages of who we are and how we are going to earn worth and how we're going to
Yeah.
earn significance and how we're going to earn safety, because
Right.
ultimately it's really about safety, right? And so um we grow up with these messages, and a lot of the
Mhm.
times they're not cognitive, they're kind of underneath the surface, right? They're not obvious. Nobody's telling me, hey, you have to achieve or you're not worthy here. You
Yeah.
can't be in our family anymore, but it was things like being a little kid and being told messages like, or given praise when you do something really well or when
Mhm.
you get an accomplishment, and that feels good. So you learn, you're
Yeah.
conditioned to keep doing that. So yeah, when I was 8 years old, I wrote this big sign, and my parents still have it at their house. It's actually the kind of infamous sign that I created. It was a little scrapbook thing, and it
Mhm.
said, "Let no one outwork you today." And I'm 8 years old, and I have it on my wall, and it just kind of became my motto. And I would
Yeah.
say it made me who I am today in a really good way and has brought me a lot of success, that
Mhm.
message, but it also led to a lot of burnout and a lot of people pleasing and perfectionism and kind of losing my
Mhm.
own voice in the way and not really feeling worthy unless I
Yeah.
was outworking everybody, right?
Right. And you know, I can contest to, yeah, like even in our culture, I'm an Indian descent. I mean, we have this stigma. Probably it's changing now, but like I've had people on my podcast of the same culture where it's, if you don't get a certain grade, you're less than. And sometimes it really affects people. And I grew up at a time back in the 80s and 90s where I was surrounded by people, and it was a lot of people were competitive. I lost a couple friends to suicide because of that.
Mhm.
And I still remember, like in my head, like I saw all the signs, but I couldn't say anything because I was a kid. But it would definitely affect me growing up because I was like, okay, if I don't get into a certain school or get into a certain profession, because again, coming from a medical background, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, not that I was pushed into it, but like I just felt like I had a need to go that route, but I didn't. And so
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to show them. I'm going to go into finance or sales, and I'm going to be the number one salesperson. And even though I
Yep.
was, and I was making six figures at one point, I was burnt out. I was depressed, anxious, and I would only be happy when I sold, when I had those six-figure days where I
Right.
was like, yes. And then the days I had nothing, I would just be like, I would be in my down days where I'm just like, maybe I'm not worthy, So I know where that comes from, but I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, I mean, you've seen so many clients. Um, what are some of the things that you talk to people that are overachievers, that are perfectionists, that even if you tell them, like, you've gone this far and you've done all this in your life, look how much you've accomplished, but for some reason there's a barrier. It's like, we can't see that. Like, it's not registering in our brains. And I get that with my clients too. It's like, as much as they've made so much um, progress, it's like all black and white. It's like, if I don't get here, it's all for nothing. If I don't get into medical school and be in the top schools and graduate at the top of the class, then it's all for nothing. But so it's like a black and white thing. So what is your take on somebody that comes to you and says, I'm worthless if I don't do X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
and your health is pretty much suffering, like your mental health, even when you get into the fields? Because a lot of people that I know, even lawyers and stuff that I have friends, they hate what they do. Like, they would just
Yeah.
quit the next day, but they can't, so.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I would say the first thing is, a lot of the time, by the time people are kind of calling me or reaching out, they are pretty aware that this pattern isn't working for them anymore.
Okay, so they
Like,
have an idea.
yeah, I think there's a part of reaching out to a therapist or a coach or anyone else that takes so much courage and bravery,
Oh yeah.
because it's vulnerable. It's very vulnerable to reach out and say, I need help. Like,
Yeah.
I've been trying to do this all on my own, and I'm not getting anywhere. And so I think it's the bravest thing that you can ever do, is to begin going to therapy. I don't think it's weak at all. I think it's actually incredibly brave and courageous, because you're saying, I can't do this on my own. I'm needing help. That in itself is humility, right?
Hmm.
And then you're on a journey of self growth. So, anyway, I want to say, most of the time when people come to me, they're kind of like, hey, I've been trying this, finding my worth in achievement, finding my worth in productivity, finding my worth in success, finding my worth in wealth or money or relationships for so long now. That's what I was conditioned to believe is going to give me worth. And it is not working out. And I would say, if anybody listening is in that place, it's like, that in itself is step one, just like awareness that maybe there's something else. Maybe this isn't what my worth is based in. And for me, it took kind of getting to that rock bottom.
Hmm.
This is just my personal journey. It kind of took getting to that rock bottom, where I've shared this story before, but I was in my PhD program. I got my undergrad, I got my master's in counseling, and then I went on to get my PhD. And I'm in the middle of my PhD program. I've been in school for 8, 9 years at this point, college and graduate level. And I have this full, like, mental breakdown, identity crisis of like,
Hmm.
why am I even doing this? Like,
Yeah.
am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? Like, is this
Yeah.
purely out of that childhood conditioning of like, if I don't get the PhD, I'm not worthy? And there was a
Yeah.
huge part of me that felt that way. And I remember having this conversation with my husband, and he's like, well, what are you going to do? Like, quit? And I'm like, no, I ain't a quitter. I'm definitely not a
Hell no.
quitter.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the conversation we had. And I'm like,
Wow.
but I need to find a deeper reason for why I'm doing this. And I sure as hell need to find a
Hmm.
deeper reason for what my worth is actually based in, because this is
Hmm.
too rocky. Like, this is
Yeah.
too, if my worth is based solely on me achieving, I'm going to be achieving until I die. And it is
Yeah.
exhausting. And so I would say that when I start working with clients, it's like, most of them have already kind of come to that awareness. And what we're doing is we're kind of building awareness and rebuilding, exploring that conditioning. Like, that childhood conditioning is
Mhm.
strong. I mean, if I've been thinking and living and breathing this one way about my worth for,
Yeah.
at that point, it was like 20 something years, it's going to take a while to rebuild that and change that and change those beliefs about myself and those core beliefs. And that's a lot of the deep therapy work that I feel like we're doing, discovering who am I and what really actually is my worth based in, and how do I want my life to be, and then taking steps to get there. So obviously it's a long process, but I would say it's a process that I've been through personally.
Yeah. And I think that's huge being a therapist, because I've been to many therapists myself. And I feel like when I talk to them about especially cultural issues, it's hard for them to grasp like the pressure. I mean, yeah, like there's other cultures that do the same thing, but for me, like I felt like particularly like every person that I was coming across was like resonating, like, yeah, that's exactly how my parents were. And so that leads me to generational stuff. Is this something that's taught in the previous generation of our grandparents and so on and so forth? Because let's face it, guys, everyone that's listening, whether you're an empath or a highly sensitive person, if you are doing something that you don't have your heart in and you work so hard to do it, you're not going to enjoy it. I mean, I found out the hard way that money is not the answer, because obviously I chased that and I figured like, okay, if I can't be a doctor, then maybe I can do something that pays a lot, and then I can maybe prove to everyone and myself that I am worthy. But all that did was cause more depression, anxiety, and it led to a breakdown, just like you said, like that moment you were burnt out. So this is a time I want to pivot to that generational patterns and people pleasing, and how do we grow awareness, especially if you're in a family structure where it's like, even like if you get like below an A minus, you're like nobody. Like that's from childhood. Not to say that I was going through that, but like everyone that I've reached out to, even clients, they have said like anything lower than a certain grade, or if they didn't get into a certain program, that they would just be like talked down to, and their family members would not accept them or even invite them to like holidays and stuff, like really stuff that would take years to undo, and then they would go to you, and then you would have to go backwards and way back and start over and find out who they are. So what do you think about the generational patterns and how to break that?
Well, the first thing I want to say that I think is very, very, very important is anyone listening, has the power right now to start that healing process for your family line. And maybe the people before you didn't have the resources, didn't have the knowledge, didn't have the education, emotionally, mental health education to do that healing work. But something that's been so powerful to watch is I've been on this journey for over 10 years now, specifically the therapy journey, been in therapy very consistently myself for over 10 years. And talking to my mom and my grandma, healing doesn't just happen in one direction. So I'm healing not only in the hope that I can leave a legacy of health and healing for my family, that's coming behind me, but healing goes in all directions. So it's crazy talking to my mom, talking to my grandma. They say things that I'm learning, they are learning. Things that I'm healing from, they are healing from. And that is the generational nature. And I would say the collective nature of healing and working past that conditioning, because it's like, you can be the catalyst to start that healing process in your family. Now, is it going to happen? Maybe not. Maybe that doesn't happen for everybody. I'm so thankful that I've gotten to see that, those just branches growing from those seeds that were planted long time ago. But I think step one is just kind of for yourself, starting that healing journey and building that awareness around what those patterns were and what those core messages were. And man, if you can get your family on board with that process with you, a lot of the work that I do is family work. And it's so powerful to be able to see families come together around an individual member who's struggling, the family that's struggling. I can't even remember your question at this point.
I'm so glad that you are very transparent, especially being a therapist, because I've had many therapists on here, and I know a lot of them outside of here I'm friends with. But for you to come on here and be transparent, like you understand, like especially what your clients are going through, I think that's a big component, and it says a lot about you as a person that you really want to generally help people, which is it's definitely hard to find because there are good and bad in every profession. And I think one of the things is just being able to empathize with someone, to connect, because that's what's going to help that other person heal and get back on track. If because I know that when I went, like it was very hard for the person to understand what I went through, especially the cultural aspect,
Yeah.
um, the PTSD, the CPTSD, the people pleasing,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. You can
Mm,
read it in the book, but like if you haven't been in that environment and you really haven't been in that for years and decades of constant, just constantly always on guard,
yeah.
if it's not checked, if someone doesn't go to you, it could one day you can be working, and I don't care if you went to the best schools and you're doing really well, it could hit you like a ton of bricks and you can burn out. And that could be that's what happens with a lot of people when they get in their career. So so I wanted to kind of switch gears here and kind of ask you, if someone is dealing with performance anxiety, or they're in a career that's very demanding, what are some things that you kind of tell your clients that kind of work that they can use right away, maybe after this podcast? And by the way, guys, this is not medical advice. Definitely see a therapist or a qualified doctor. Um, so with that said, what are some things that you could recommend for someone that's listening right now, that could just kind of nudge them towards that route to start to at least get some of those symptoms under control?
absolutely. I really appreciate your disclaimer because I mean, my number one tip is like, if you have access, like, please get connected with a therapist or a
Mhm,
counselor if you're experiencing anxiety or depression or PTSD. I think that having that personalized treatment experience with a
mhm,
professional who is there for you is so helpful. But one of the biggest things that I share on my Instagram, which is kind of heavily focused toward high functioning anxiety, but it goes across the board for anxiety, performance anxiety, social anxiety, like anything. um, we can't really talk about anxiety without talking about the nervous system.
sure.
So, basically anxiety is coming out of a lot of a dysregulated nervous system. And that starts with the fight or flight. That
Mhm,
starts with the section of the brain that is there for safety. And I tell
mm.
people, I'm a little bit maybe countercultural in this. I don't care. I'll be a rebel. But I tell people that anxiety is not all bad. And so
Mhm,
I think the key, number one, is working on regulating your nervous system.
mhm,
Practically, what does that look like? That looks like incorporating mindfulness and meditation and breath work, um, progressive muscle relaxation. I mean, you can Google a lot of these things. I share a lot of this on my Instagram and in my newsletter, my weekly newsletter. But another one is, massage therapy. I think healing through the body is one really, really massive way to overcome anxiety because, as I'm sure you know, anxiety is very physical. There's
sure.
many, many physiological symptoms of anxiety: stomach butterflies,
Mhm,
headaches, stomach aches, nausea, racing heartbeat, right? And so we need to learn ways to regulate and calm the nervous system, and start getting really good at that. And I don't believe that anything else is really going to be effective until we're able to regulate our nervous system in a
mhm,
better way. So that's another thing that I focus heavily on in therapy with
mhm,
clients, is working to regulate their nervous system and help them actually feel a sense of calm,
mhm.
know how to calm their body, recognize their anxiety triggers. I'm a big fan of journaling. So building
Yep.
awareness through journaling. I have a lot of resources on journaling too, but
It's very
for
therapeutic.
so therapeutic. And
Mhm,
journaling can look like anything. I prefer to journal like my anxious thoughts, or maybe different sensations that I'm feeling in my body that day related to anxiety. Gratitude journaling is also like
Huge for me.
neurologically shown to like rewire your brain.
Hmm.
It's crazy. So I think all of the normal like yoga and exercise and getting into nature, and I think with the way that our world is now, with the technology and the fast pace of our world, and
Sure.
especially for achievers, um, we've kind of lost touch with a lot of these things that we used to be able to do to calm ourselves and regulate. We're not
Yeah.
really in touch with those things anymore in our modern society. And so kind of getting back to some of those things and finding calming rhythms is key.
Yeah, there's many different ways to reduce anxiety, and every person's different. So if you guys,
Yes.
tried everything, definitely don't give up. I mean, I've even gone as far as like CBD oil and like all kinds of
Mhm.
supplements and
Or
sucking up.
medication.
Yeah, medication.
Medication. Yeah. There's so many. I mean, for me, there's no shame in the mental health game. So
Mhm.
I'm like, really, whatever healthy things that you need to do in order to get to a place where your body and your mind are feeling calm, it's like, start with one or two things and
Mhm.
actually give it a fair shot. Like, I feel like sometimes clients or other people on
Yeah.
social media or whatever, they'll be like, I tried journaling and it didn't work. And I'm like, did you
2
try it like
days.
2 times? Yeah. I'm like, you're talking about rewiring like
It doesn't
brain
happen. Yeah,
patterns. Like that doesn't happen in 2 days. Like
sure.
it took you 25 years to get here. It ain't going to take you 2 days of
Yeah.
journaling to get out of here, you know?
Yeah, that's what I tell a lot of my clients. It's like you got to sit down and just do it. Just write, even if you have to swear, or if it's whatever you want to just put on the paper, just put it, and you can rip it up afterwards. It's so therapeutic. I do it. And I might just rip it up afterwards, but I need to get those thoughts out. And sometimes, you don't want to go to somebody and tell them like everything. So you just write it out, and I feel so much better. But if somebody is listening right now and they've tried everything like journaling, meditation, and let's say it's more of a hormonal issue. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How does hormones impact our mood, our anxiety, our cortisol, testosterone, estrogen, all of that? So if that's off balance, none of that's going to work, is it?
Yeah. So I like to say that anxiety is well, there's many parts of anxiety and mental health, but yes, a huge component of mental health is chemical, hormonal,
Mhm.
even genetic. Like there's very, very heavy genetic connections with ADHD and bipolar disorder and anxiety and depression. And, we're talking about those generational patterns of the way that your family has coped for generations when we talk about addiction or trauma. Um, and those things can be really tough. We also have what I call situational factors. So that would be something like a huge life transition or a divorce or a trauma, or you're going through something like a job change or a pandemic,
Mhm.
like a situational factor
Many
contributing
of
to
us, yeah.
anxiety. So when we talk about chemical or hormonal issues, I mean, one of my biggest, just to dive into the recommendations without really talking about why that um, is to get frequent blood work done
Mhm.
with a functional medicine doctor or a MD, or your family medicine doctor, whoever's doing your regular annual checkups. Um, you can test for cortisol levels, for thyroid. Um, Thyroid issues are very heavily linked with anxiety, as our anxiety and digestive issues are heavily, heavily linked, because 90% of our serotonin is actually created in the gut.
Mm.
And so, if we're having any type of imbalances in our gut or issues with our digestion, that's going to impact our serotonin, which is going to
Yeah.
impact depression, anxiety. So, I definitely work really closely with a lot of doctors and MDs. I suggest regular blood work
Yeah.
just to rule out any sort of medical chemical components. Um, and ultimately, you can work with your therapist or your counselor and your medical professional in order to kind of rule things out and then be able to make a proper diagnosis and
Mhm.
treatment plan.
Yeah, the gut is the second brain, they say. And And that's what hits a lot of people when they get anxious. Their stomach starts hurting, like me. Like
Yeah.
I'll feel it.
Yeah.
I'm like, uh-oh, something, like I'm not anxious, but I'm going to be because my stomach is starting to, because I get those butterflies and stuff. So I can totally say that, gut health is very important, at least for me. Like I have to watch what I eat. And if I eat like
Yeah.
certain fatty foods, I'm going to feel like crap. Like,
Well, and we're connected. Like
yeah,
that's what I think is so, maybe that's like the take home point here is our body, our mind, our emotions, our relationships. It's all connected. We're not just individual little floating beings and everything's all
right.
segmented off. And I mean, that was one of our biggest missions when we opened Atlanta Wellness Collective, was to really be able to combine the mind body spirit approach, and why we offer therapy along with nutrition and dietetics and massage and chiropractic, because we're not just kind of focusing on mental health. We're also trying to help our clients really, really, really solve what is the underlying issues here. And I think that's the future. I mean, that is the future of mental health care and healthcare in general. So we're all connected, in that way.
Yeah, I mean, especially with social media and all of us like looking at a computer all day or a phone, there's not much movement, and
Yeah.
that causes depression, because you get that high dopamine, and that's why we're all kind of addicted to our phones and our work. And so, just wrapping up here, for everyone that's listening out there that might be still affected by the pandemic, they're going through so much in life. What can you kind of tell them if they're kind of going through a hard time, even now that we're still in the pandemic phase, but it doesn't seem like the world will ever go back to the way it was, even the
Yeah.
jobs. And so there's a lot of people that are depressed. They've given up. They're maybe in a abusive relationship with a narcissist, or they're in a dead-end job, and they're just like, okay, I'm just going to do the motions. But what can you tell that listener right now that's listening? What can they do to just kind of get just like baseline and start moving towards something that could lead to a little bit more productivity and happiness?
Well, I would say that you're not alone. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that um, one of the biggest lies that I can believe is that I'm alone. Nobody understands my experience, or nobody will ever get it. And I don't think that's the case. I think that the community that you're building here with the on-call empath is huge, because this is a community of other individuals who experience these same things. And
Yeah.
I think one of the superpowers of being a therapist, there are many superpowers, but I think one of the superpowers, and one thing that I really wish everyone got the opportunity to experience, is to sit across from individuals and hear their struggles and their pain and celebrate their wins with them. And I feel like I'm constantly changed and stretched just by getting the sheer blessing and opportunity to do that. Because for me, it's a big honor. And why I say that is because what it has taught me is that we really are not alone. We really are not alone. I've worked with all sorts of people, and what I know is we all struggle. We all go through hard things. We all self-doubt. We all feel stressed. We all feel depressed. And I think that especially in a pandemic, especially when you're feeling depressed and anxious, the first thing is to think, I'm completely alone. I'm messed up. You're not messed up. You're not alone.
No.
And I would encourage anybody listening to reach out for support.
Yeah.
Even if that's just on Instagram, or, I mean, obviously Instagram's not therapy, but I mean, even if it's on Instagram, or even if it's, maybe a coach or a therapist or a local counselor or a pastor or somebody who you can connect with, that you trust, and just share with them that you're struggling. And, I think that's step number one.
Yeah. I think that was one of my biggest things. It's like, it's taboo to reach out to somebody, go to a therapist, medication, all this stuff. Cause this is what was like downloaded as a growing
Yeah.
up. So it's like, I'm not going to do that. So what if someone finds out? But now I'm an advocate of them. Like, you need to go to somebody that knows what they're talking about, and that's when I started doing that. Like, it was like a game changer. So, well, Nicole, it's been a total honor for you to be on the podcast. I just love your Instagram because, like, I watch them and they're so entertaining. So if you guys check out her Instagram, because I get a lot of good ideas from that too. So if you want to just give a shout out to your website or
Yeah.
your things that you're up to, feel free to let my audience know what you're up to.
Sure. I think the number one resource that I have, at least right now, is my weekly newsletter. That's the Anxious Achievers Club. And basically, it's just a space that allows me to provide resources, tools. I provide like free YouTube trainings. And I get all of the ideas and content for the newsletter from my Instagram story crew. So the Instagram story crew typically kind of pulls what they want me to write newsletters about. And this week's is all about the nervous system and regulating your nervous system. And I've got newsletters on journaling and I mean, so many great things. So I would say join the newsletter. It's a super fun little community, and we have a Spotify playlist where we're official, it's fun. And then on Instagram, I'm at Coco Thax. So COCOTHAX. And that's kind of my little Instagram world, I guess. But really, it's just a community for anyone who considers themselves an anxious achiever. I pretty much just share like the anxiety content there. And I hang out in stories, and you can see, a little bit of my entrepreneurial journey and kind of what we do with Atlanta Wellness Collective. I'm also on TikTok, and I have so much fun on TikTok now.
Oh, I love them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm on TikTok, lots of anxiety content. And my TikTok is at Dr. Nicole Thaxton, Dr. Nicole Thaxton. And I can send you all that info if you'd like. But if you catch me in any of those places, you can sign up for the newsletter in my Instagram or my TikTok bio. But you can find all my info there. And that's kind of where I hang out each day when I'm not with clients and doing all the work stuff.
Awesome. Well, keep up the good work, and I'll look forward to all of your entertaining TikTok videos. I wish I could do that.
TikTok is so fun.
I know. I'm like, how does she do that? Like,
I have to tell you just really quickly, because I think this is hilarious. So I was telling somebody this today, but I started my Instagram as a way to like collect resources that I use with my clients. And I was like, I just need somewhere where I can like share this with somebody, because I talk about this all the time, And so my Instagram just started kind of becoming this collection of like anxiety tools and support. And then my stepdaughter is she's 13. She's like, you have to get on TikTok, and I'm like, no, like I don't do the video, like no, I create the graphics, I'm good. Because I'm actually, pretty painfully introverted and like, yeah. So anyway, I was like, no. So she set up my TikTok, and a few months later, we're at like 45,000
You're huge
on TikTok. We had a few viral videos, and I'm like, wow, okay, people are enjoying this. So my TikTok is like all high functioning anxiety community, and it's hilarious. And I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's a lot of fun. And I get to kind of enjoy that with my stepdaughter a little bit. She kind of connects with me through that.
It's very
and other
creative.
Things.
Very creative content.
It's really fun. Yeah. So I appreciate that. I enjoy being social media friends.
There you go. Guys, check her out. And again, you're always welcome back. I hope to collaborate in the future. If you come up with anything, I'd love to work with you again. So thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right, guys, stay tuned. This wraps up for this elite episode of the On Call Empath. Always keep moving forward. And with that said, we are
You're listening to the On Call Empath.